Welcome. Um, Before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and read this Truth, Equity, and Justice acknowledgement. And I've listened to many land acknowledgements over the last few years, and in my opinion, this is one of the most inclusive and equitable one I've ever heard. And I felt it belonged here today as we talk about building our own NPO infrastructures. So I'll go ahead and read this, and we'll go ahead and move forward. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life. And oh, sorry about that. And some have lived on those lands since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building and meeting mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. So we begin this meeting acknowledging that we are on the ancestral lands of the Spokane tribe of Indians and other tribes who are connected through a shared history of trade, celebration, and resources. We make this acknowledgement to pay respects to their elders, past and present, whose knowledge remains on the land and within their people. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in continuing to learn about such truths and actions as we can take towards restorative justice. And this is credited to Jenny Slagle. She's a citizen of the Colville Confederated Tribes, and she's the Better Health Together Director of Tribal Relations. And to meet me, I'm the presenter. I'm a Spokane tribal citizen, and I am the owner of Spo-ka'nay Enterprises. And my core competencies is in professional writing, where I help with grant and contract proposals, toolkits for reports, presentations. And then my training, I look at nonprofit development, grant prospecting and writing, and project management. And then I also provide technical assistance with problem solving, knowledge transfer, and team building. So I do a lot of other things too, but those are the three places that you'll see me doing a lot of work in. To begin with, our agenda for tonight is goal and learning objectives, and then we'll also cover nonprofit organization definitions. We'll cover some key documents, and then we'll look at a nonprofit holistic model, and then two business models that inside a nonprofit business organization. Earlier, you received a list of workshop handouts. All the registrants got them, and you should have gotten a grant readiness checklist, a bingo card, the value of volunteer time, a nonprofit holistic model. So also Tom is posting these in the chat box too, so you can download them if you hadn't had a chance to earlier. The goal of this workshop is to provide the attendees with information about building a nonprofit organization. And as a result, you will learn about you'll be able to define NPO and FPO. You'll identify and fill out the document gaps in your own organization, and you'll be able to explain the two business models that are within a nonprofit organization. So nonprofit organizations, not-for-profit organizations, and for-profit organizations. I felt it was best that we start here. So we have definitions of these different types of organizations, and that it's a nice place to start. Everybody's on the same field. So what is a nonprofit organization? Well, the IRS has a tax code definition, and under section 501c3, it's defined as a public charity, also known as a charitable nonprofit and private foundations. Common definitions that you'll find if you go around and ask somebody on the street, how do you define a nonprofit? You'll probably hear them say, well, it's a group organized to better the community in which it serves. And then the common abbreviation is NPO. And so you'll hear me say NPO a lot on here. And then we're going to go ahead and do a little poll here. And we're going to leave it up for a little bit while I go through the different definitions. So you might want to move it toward the side of the thing here. So how old is your nonprofit? It's less than a year old, 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10, and more than 10. And when I finish going through the definitions, you can go ahead and we'll see what the results are. So what is a not-for-profit organization? I know some people think they're the same thing, but they're not quite the same. A not-for-profit is a 501c7, and it's organized for pleasure, recreation, and other nonprofit purposes. So basically, it's a club that defines them as a 501c7. A common definition, it basically exists to fulfill an owner's organizational objectives. I mean, if you have a club or something that wants to um, go around and climb all the different mountains in Washington State, and they become a 501(c)(7) and they collect money and stuff for that, that's what that's about. And a common abbreviation for that is NFPO. And then we have, what is a for-profit organization? Well, this tax code definition is basically a corporation status. It could be a C corporation, an S corporation, whatever the different types of corporation statuses are. And then the common definition is that it operates with the goal of making money by selling a product or service to their customers. The owner earns an income, or the stakeholders, or not their stakeholders, but their shareholders also earn income from the profit. And that's a common abbreviation is FPO. All right. So thank you for answering the poll. And I wanted to share this here with you. This is a chart here that I found about the differences between a for-profit organization and a nonprofit. And as you look at it, you can see there is pretty big differences around here that you can see from the objectives all the way down to the product demand. And the objectives, like for a for-profit, is profit motive. They're motivated by profits, and the NPOs are motivated by societal benefit. Then as we go down here, we'll look at the focus is that the for-profit is immediate customer satisfaction, nonprofit, long-term society. I wanted you guys to take a look at this. I'm not going to read this to you directly, but one of the things that what interested me in this is that the performance measurement, and we'll talk about metrics and measurement later on in the program here, but for profit, they measure their performance by their amount of sales they have, return on investments, the dividends, and the market share. But for nonprofits, we look at the people that are served, and we see if they're satisfied, and if they are satisfied, that we have donors, our repeat donors, that they come back because they like the job that we're doing. And that's something that I think that's why a lot of us participate in nonprofit organizations, because we want to feel that satisfaction, not just for the people that we serve, but also that the donors who give us the money to do the work we do. Does anybody have any questions about this table or want to make any comments on it? You can use the raise hand feature if you'd like. Oh, okay. Well, if you have any questions and stuff, you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that as soon as I find another break. Okay, and go ahead. Next slide. So this is a big part of the presentation here is these key documents, this AKA, also known as the grant readiness checklist. And I recently came across this maybe about a year and a half ago. And I wanted to know, do you guys have a grant readiness checklist? Yes, no, or don't know. There's no right answer. So you can go ahead and answer as much as you want, or as many as you want, and we'll give you guys a chance to answer these questions here. We're going to go ahead and go forward here. So what is a grant readiness checklist? It's basically an essential document that lists commonly requested items from the funders that you are asking money from. And it streamlines the essential document so that you can put it in a shared drive or a share folder that anyone who helps with writing your proposals can have access to. And anybody who's assisting you in submitting your proposals or your applications for grants can have access to. So if you're off on a vacation and something really cool grant application comes up and your office decides to go ahead and apply for it, it's in a place where everybody knows where it's at, so they don't have to call you and interrupt your vacation because they know where all the paperwork's at. But it also assists in identifying document gaps within your organization. So we'll go ahead and go through this. And this is what it looks like. So this is part of the packet that was sent out earlier. And this is also part of the documents that Tom put in the chat box just as we got started. And we'll go over each of those parts: the organizational infrastructure, the tax documents, the financial information, governance, initiative or program and project information, and other documentation. And so we will have a little polls as we go along here to break up the text that you're going to be seeing. And I'll probably stop and ask if anybody has any questions as we go along. So to begin off, it's a really easy thing under organizational infrastructure. The primary thing is contact information. So address, phone, information, email, website, etc., on who they can contact. Your organizational story about us. And it's basically the biography of your organization, your history, your founders, why it was founded, and how and any achievements since its founding. And that's really important because you're pretty much introducing yourself to your funders. And even though you may have written it and put it in your application, sometimes a lot of funders will go out and look you up on your websites just to see what it is. If you have anything posted, if you have stories from something that happened in your program maybe 3 years ago and it's not current, they may question, why aren't you up to date on your story? So you want to make sure your story is up to date and that it has pictures, photos that are actually okay to use. Like if you have children in your photos, you have to make sure that you have the parents' permissions and stuff like that. So you want to make sure they're legally part of your story. And you also want to include the year you established. And if there's been any major changes. For example, I know some nonprofits who established under one name, and then about 10 years later, they decided, well, that's not really who they are anymore, and they changed their name. And and then they talk about what they were about when they first started, and then they changed it. And so you want to make sure you explain why there's a name change. Also, part of this is you want your vision, mission, and value statements. And everyone in your organization and the community that they serve should know these three statements. They explain what you hope to attain, how you're going to get there, and what your organization values. I mean, do your values as an organization align with the community values? And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Excuse me. I don't want to lose my voice in the middle of this. But in order for a nonprofit organization to succeed in the community that they serve, your values should align with one another. And so that you have mutual respect between the organization and the community members. Um, Another thing is the service area. And I know some of you don't um, serve in different areas, but there are some nonprofits out there that have multiple service areas. And what I mean, like if you have office in Spokane or you're headquartered in Spokane, that's fine. But then you also have other service areas, like maybe out on in Welpanet or on the Spokane Indian Reservation, or maybe Deer Park, or maybe down in Rosalia. And so, or Area Heights, you want to make sure you have the locations that you serve. And if you have contact members there or offices in there, so that you have contact information. So if people from that area know that they have someone local that they can talk to, they have somewhere to go and they can uh, talk with them. And if you have a program director who is in that particular area, because that's what the community that they're serving, then they have information that they can talk to you about someone who's actually doing the program work there. The population being served. What that means is that list your demographics of the people of your area. Basically, you can include the age, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, income, education, anything that your community feels comfortable in sharing. That's the important piece. Is that ask your community members, what can we share with the outside world about you? And maybe you can come up with some little paragraph about this your community, talk about the different socioeconomic statuses, family sizes, age ranges, and then you can collect this type of information using small survey questionnaires or polls conducted by your organization. And then if you're unsure about how to categorize your population, you could always go to the US Census data tables and choose population. And you'll see a list of the different topics under population you can add to your polls and surveys. And what that's important about is because there are certain funders who only serve specific populations that you serve. And if you have that data on hand, then you don't have to go out and say, oh, we need to find out if these people are part of our community. And if they're not, and it takes too long to collect that data, then you might lose out on some pretty good money out there. previous year data, and then this is the number of people served. Again, the demographics of the people that you serve. That it's good information to have on hand for yourselves as an organization, because then you can see how much that number increases or how much that number decreases, or if you're adding new demographics to their community. And it gives you an idea of the ebbs and flows in the different groups within your community. And that also helps you identify whether or not there's more need under different areas that you hadn't seen before. Oh, I see Tatiana has a question here. Can the service area also be in another state? Yes, it can. If you've listed in your about us that you serve different states, then you can provide the different service areas with the locations within that other state. So yes, that'd be good to do that too. A good example of that is the Northwest Area Foundation, because they serve Washington, Oregon, and then some others like in Michigan and stuff. So they serve a lot of different states, and they have the service areas that they serve. All right. You also want to list the number of full-time equivalent staff members. And this is important, and also probably your part-time employees too. It gives a percentage, it gives your grantor an idea of how many people actually work. And then also you can also give your number of volunteers too, so they can see how many people are there to support your programs, as well as provide services to your community members. And the current resumes and biographies of key staff and volunteers, normally they ask you for that for those people who are going to be working on the project that you're asking money for. But it's always good to have this on hand, because, and sometimes nonprofits also have resumes and biographies of their board of directors. The reason they do this is that if you have a project that they're thinking that might work, you have a grant that's got a new program out that they want to give money to, you can go really quick and look at your resumes and see, okay, who of my staff would be a really good fit to work on this, and would they enjoy it? Would they be passionate about working on this project? And then you can have them help write that part of the narrative, so that they can show that they're really passionate about it. You have their expertise. You know that somebody can work on this, and you won't have to worry about finding someone to fit for that project. Before I go into tax documents, did anybody have any questions about the organizational infrastructure piece? All right, tax documents, the most feared section of all, I think. Everybody hears the word IRS and they go, ah, IRS, run away. But actually, the tax documents aren't too bad here. IRS has a section called 501c, and under 501c3 is for nonprofits, as we've talked about earlier, because that's a designation for charitable nonprofits or charitable organizations. And when you apply to become a 501c3, they give you a determination letter telling you that, hey, you've been accepted, it's been approved, and you are now 501c3. This letter is always asked for by grantors. They want to know if you really are a 501c3 and that you're eligible to apply for their grants. So you want to make sure you have this as a digital copy. If you have because the IRS is going to send you a paper copy. I don't know if they send digital copies out anymore, or if they do send digital copies out, I haven't heard. If you do have one, great. But also make sure you have a paper one, because you never know if your server is going to go down and you lose something. And then the next one is an employer identification number, or EIN number. It goes by 7 different names. Someone will ask you for your federal employer identification number or the federal tax identification number, and that's known as the TIN. So there's the EIN and the TIN numbers. They're the same thing. And what it is you're not automatically given that. You actually have to apply for it. And then the IRS will send you a letter, maybe about 4 to 6 weeks later, giving you your EIN number. And it's a unique number. It's a 9-digit number, and it allows business entities, including nonprofits, operating in the United States for purposes of identification. So when someone asks you for your EIN number, you know, then you have it and it's there, and um, it's very important. And then the IRS Form 990 is an annual information return filed with the IRS. And most tax exempt organizations must file this. And in a nutshell, it gives the IRS an overview of your activities, governance, and detailed financial information. And what's really interesting about that is that the organization, the nonprofits, use this form too to share information about their company, about the work they've done with the public, and it'll have information about the programs. And also, the states rely on this form for state income tax filing requirements. And then also, I don't know if you guys heard of GuideStar, but GuideStar has a list of all the nonprofits within the United States and foundations and stuff, and it uses that information so that anybody who wants to look up your information on 990, they can go there and look it up. There's also some other um, grant or prospecting platforms like Instrumental, and they pull all the new 990s that the IRS releases too, and then you can take a look at all the all the information about different kind of funders. Some other tax documents. This IRS Form W-9, basically, if you're you should have one of your own with your own company name, your own EIN number, signed by whoever's authorized to sign it, and have it for the year. Because once you get a grant or get an award, I should say, you're going to be asked for that form so that they can give you money. And they have to put that, your EIN number and that. So that's why you have that W-9 form. And it's how the government follows the money transfer between your organization and your clients or grantors. And it's basically tracking the income that is paid to you. The next one, the System for Award Management, SAM, registration. And you need to have one of these registrations if you want to receive any federal funds. This is kind of relatively new thing, with at least within the last 5 years. And it's a little complicated because it combined a lot of different agency stuff within the federal government. And I'm not going to list them here. When the workbook comes out, you'll see that list there. But basically, it's required for any entity to bid on and get paid for federal contracts or to receive federal funds, which includes grant awards. And so you have to have SAM registration. And what's kind of interesting is once you've got a SAM registration and you've approved bids by SAM, then they give you a unique entity identification. And it's an authorized identifier for federal government. And it has to do with doing business with the federal government. So basically, when you receive a federal grant award, you are doing business with the federal government. And this UEI number, excuse me, has replaced the DUNS number. So if you used to hear about the DUNS and then the DUNS number has kind of disappeared, now you're hearing about the unique entity identification number. So DUNS and BAR was a different kind of company that assigned numbers. The federal government decided, okay, maybe we should just have this all under the federal government umbrella. And so we'll go ahead and start doing our own UEI number, and then we won't use DUNS anymore. And so that's what all this is about. Hopefully it won't be so messy trying to think about this anymore within the next couple of years. And the last piece under tax documents is state business identification. When you file in your company, when your organization, files within the Department of Revenue for your state, you are given a business entity or organization number for tax purposes. And the state tax ID is associated with the state in which the business operates. And even though the Washington state doesn't have state income tax, they still want to make sure that you have a business identification number. And for Washington State, I'm looking up my business license here. It's called the Unified Business ID. So it's UBI. I don't know what it is in Oregon or California, but all the states have state business identification numbers. So Okay, that's the end of that section. Any questions about tax documents? Financial information. Um, an organizational budget. Fortunately for you, we're not going to take deep dives into the financial stuff because this would take us at least 4 or 5 days, I swear. Huh, Jeff? Jeff's been on one of my finance management things and it took like 3 days, wasn't it, to go over everything? Sorry, Jeff, put you on the spot like that. But this is just this is an overview. And an organizational budget is important for everything in your organization. And it's the operating plan stated in dollar terms. And it's the amount of money available for spending that is based on a plan of how it will be spent. And if that helps you realize that that's what a budget is, then maybe it'll be easier to think of it that way instead of thinking, oh my God, it's numbers. I don't know how to deal with this. But it is detailed in that every dollar of income, which means treasure, which is money, time, which is time, and talent in the people that you get, and expenses are planned for each program and each project that the organization offers to the community it serves. So it's a very big, it could be multiple pages in an Excel document. It could be in a QuickBook. It could be in a paper ledger. However you want to keep track of your budgets. You just make sure you keep it track in a well planned way. Now, underneath this organizational budget, each program will have its own budget that rolls up into the organizational budget. So think about a hierarchy here. So at the very top, you'll see the organizational budget. And then below it, you'll see each different program will have its own budget. And again, it's another operating plan for that program. And same thing, money in detail about the program itself. And then the next layer underneath program budgets are the project budgets. So each project that belongs to a program rolls up into the program, which rolls up into the organization. So it's a really multi-layered cake here. And so you want to make sure that all the details end up in the organizational budget. And that's all I got to say about that, because anything more is going to take us much, much longer. And we don't have time for that. Huh, Jeff? Okay. So the next thing is the different kinds of documents that you will see under financial information. And they'll be asking you for your statement of financial position because that's the name of the document that nonprofits use. For-profits call it a balance sheet. And for nonprofits, it's the statement of financial position looks a little different than a balance sheet for a for-profit. This image I have here is what a statement of financial position looks like. And on one side, you have all your assets. And on the other side of the equal sign is liabilities plus net assets. And it lists there what those things are. And it captures the financial information at a point in time. And it summarizes what the organization owns and owes at a specific date. And the basic layout of the balance sheet is based on this formula here. Assets equals liabilities plus net assets. And it shows the accumulated results of all the individual years of an organization's operations put together. And so, again, that's another long discussion and days of looking at balance sheets and learning how to read it. But this is what they will ask you for as part of submitting your paperwork for a grant or a loan or anything where you want money for your organization. So I thought I'd slip this in here, the different accounting differences for nonprofit organizations versus for-profit. And I kind of liked it because it had purple in it, but also it complemented the green really well. But it summarizes very well some of the things that we're going to be talking about that we've talked about earlier and that we're going to be talking about as we go along. But as you can see here, the nonprofit is in green here, and provides services needed by society and ensures most effective allocation of resources. We have the statement of financial position. Got to move my camera, sorry. The statement of activities, net assets, change in net assets, statement of functional expenses classifies expenses by program management, general and fundraising. And we're not going to go into that. That's the accounting piece. restricted and unrestricted contributions, in-kind contributions, grants and awards, and events, dues, and sales. For the for-profit side, we have earn profits for stockholders and provide services or sell goods, um, balance sheet, income statement, retained earnings, net income or loss. And then for-profit corporations are not required to use functional accounting to classify expenses. Lucky them. And then sales of merchandise, service fees, and shares of stock. So those are the the accounting differences that you will see between the two. If you were in a for-profit and you're coming to a nonprofit world, that's the differences that you'll see, and vice versa. So some more financial information that we have that they'll ask for is the income and expense statement, which is basically the profit and loss. And it presents income and expense activity over a period, like over a month or a quarter or a fiscal year. And often it's year to date. And the income statement reflects the changes in an organization's net assets resulting from income and expenses that occur during current fiscal year. It is also known as the statement of financial activities. And it should be pulled and reviewed once a month. And if you board of directors, when you have a board of directors meeting, they will want to look at the statement of financial activities as well as the balance sheet, and just to look at it to make sure everything looks good. A most recent audit, if applicable, some places do ask for a most recent audit, and it's a thorough, detailed examination of a company's financial statements and accounts. And the dispassionate third-party auditor conducts the audit. And basically, they're just looking at your books to make sure everything balances, that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's, and it also shows how well you're doing. And this information also helps guide decision making and looking at the internal controls of your finances of your organization. Like I said, not everybody has an audit. And not everybody does an audit every year. Sometimes people do audits every 5 years. It just depends on what's in the fiscal policies of your organization. If it says in your fiscal policies an audit needs to be done once a year, then an audit should be done once a year. Or if it should be done every 5 years or under certain circumstances, that's when an audit is done. So that's something to think about. But not if you don't have an audit, you just tell them not applicable. This sources of funding. I thought this was interesting because I thought it was only just a few things. So this is something I learned when doing more research for this presentation. I thought I was just going to be talking about fees for goods and services, individual donations, and foundation grants and government grants. But when I saw that there's all these different things where your organization can get money as a nonprofit, I thought, okay, I'm just going to list it all here, and so you guys can take a look at maybe there's some things that you're not seeing or not thinking about bringing money into your own organization. So there's the fees for goods and services, individual donations, and major gifts. Those are the top things. Bequests, finding if somebody will donate something out of their will. And I never thought about that, but I guess it's been there in the back of my mind because I see KSPS always running their ads about, oh yes, consider putting us in your will. And so that's something to think about. Corporate contributions, foundation grants, that's pretty straightforward. Empire Health Foundation is provided most everybody on this call with grants. There's government grants, contracts, and cooperative agreements. And the cooperative agreement is a more relative, recent thing that the federal government is using to work with nonprofits. So instead of giving them contracts, they're giving them cooperative agreements, which means you work with the federal government to provide services to a certain population. For example, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration released earlier this year a request for application for a cooperative agreement for nonprofits to work with them on a center for the American Indian Alaska Native Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health. That is unheard of. That hasn't been seen ever. Something like that has always gone to a for-profit 8A contractor. And to see that come out as a cooperative agreement, and then so I got curious. And I started looking around, and a number of federal government agencies now are asking for cooperative agreements with nonprofits to work with the communities that they serve. So something's going on in the government where they're seeing how important nonprofit organizations are and how they're more apt to be able to reach the communities that they want to give money to. So that might be something to consider looking at is cooperative agreements within the federal government. Interest from investments, loans or program related investments, tax revenue, and membership dues and fees. So I think this is my last slide for financial information. Oh, nope, not yet. So I thought that would be cool for you guys to look at that. And let's go back to that for a second. There's one thing I forgot to say. The ideal mix of funding sources depends on you as a nonprofit. And it's very ideal for you to use a mix of funding sources because it's the best way for you to achieve your sustainability goals as an organization. So instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, here's a lot of different baskets to choose from. Okay. And there used to be a percentage of that, like 80% of your money should come from individual donations and 20% from grants. I think by looking at this list, that ratio can be changed. You can add a lot of different things out there to look at, and maybe change it up a little bit because I've heard and I've seen too that a lot of individual donations are kind of drying up a little bit, and maybe some major gifts, but so there's some other ways to look for money. Fiscal policies and procedures. So policies are protocols to guide decisions and achieve desired outcomes. And that has to do with the money that you guys make or bring in or earn. And then the procedures are the steps to take and implement a policy. So together, the procedures represent an NPO's detailed list of what needs to be done, who is responsible, how roles and duties are segregated, and steps for achieving completion. So basically, it's if you're looking at your budget as a statement of operations, it's the fiscal policies and procedures on how to achieve those operations and making sure everything's done correctly. Under other and notes, you won't see bingo in your grant readiness checklist because I found this at the last minute. I completely forgot about bingo, and it's provided by the Washington State Nonprofit Institute's Finance Unlocked for Nonprofits. And I used this years ago when I was at Potlatch Fund. And I thought it was kind of interesting because this is also the next set of things, handouts that you guys have. But it's the balance sheet, the income statement, the 990 giving an oversight. And it's a really cool little thing. And I'm sorry that this picture is horrible on this, but it looks better this way. And you can play this game. And what I had my grantees do, is we played it as a icebreaker. And we had gone through a couple of some of the things we talked about, and then we called out things in the bingo card, and it actually was pretty fun. And if you go to that, watch the institutes. Let's see, I think it's on the previous thing. Yeah, there's up here in this corner, there's a link in there, but you'll see it on the handout. And you can go in there and get the whole game and stuff, and maybe you can play it around in your office and make everybody a little more comfortable with the balance sheet, the income statement, 990s, and giving an oversight. So let's talk about governance. Board of directors roster. And pretty much all corporations, nonprofit and for-profit, are legally required to have a board of directors. And this roster will be requested at every level. And minimally, it should include the name, date when the board member joined, their title or role, and how they represent the community they serve. And that can come in a number of different ways. You just have to follow the list, the request, in order. If you don't provide this and what they ask for, sometimes, and I've noticed this in a lot of federal grant applications, if you don't put it in the order they want or in the table that they give you an example of, because they say it's not required, but we suggest, Whenever you see the federal government say, we suggest or we strongly suggest, that means do it their way or it's not going to be approved or it's just going to go into the round file, which is the trash bag. So make sure you follow that list. Um, the organizational chart is pretty much straightforward because they'll ask for an organizational chart too of your board of directors. And it's basically, it can be a simple diagram like this, that the board has a president, it has an executive team, and there's so many board members. And that's all I need. That's all you want. Don't think you can go ahead and put their name and make it join the roster and the chart together and get away with that because no, they don't. That'll show that you didn't follow directions. So make sure you follow directions, give them the roster, and then give them their organizational chart separately. And then policies and procedures for governance. The policies set some parameters for decision making, but they leave room for flexibility and they show the why behind an action. The procedures set the step-by-step instructions for specific tasks and they explain the how behind the action. And as you can see in this little diagram here, where they come together at this Venn diagram, both can be considered guidelines. They're not hard, fast rules. So, but they have to be in place. Even though they're considered guidelines, you still have to have these in place because your staff and the organization itself, as well as all the board members in the community, need to know what policies and procedures there are for running the organization. When they ask for a current strategic plan, if applicable. So it's a document that's developed collaboratively among the board, staff, volunteers, and community members. Everybody takes place. Everybody has a stake in this. And it can help define and share the direction of your nonprofit and how it will work in the next 3 to 5 years. It includes the nonprofit's vision, mission, and value statements, the goals, and the actions to take to achieve those goals. And what's interesting about a strategic plan that everybody's involved in, a strategic plan isn't something you just write out and put it on a shelf. It's actually something that you can even call it your logic model of how you're going to move through your mission statement and your vision statements. And you may find as your community changes, your vision statement's going to change. And then your mission statement will change. And maybe your values might change. So if you come back with your community every 3 years and find out if those changes are happening, that's a good time to take a look and start moving things around a little bit. The articles of incorporation, your bylaws, and your established. And so the articles of incorporation are the public documents that you filed with your state's Secretary of State to create your nonprofit. And in some cases, those are called the certificate of incorporation or corporate charter. Depends on your state. You might have to look it up if you're not in Washington State. Washington State, we call it the articles of incorporation. The bylaws are an internal document that outlines rules and procedures for how the nonprofit will operate. And your established is basically when you legally became recognized by the state. And you know, we talked about this earlier under your organizational information. So it's in 2 places. A succession plan is an important piece because it's a risk management strategy to ensure the sustainability of the organization. And it's planning for a smooth and thoughtful transition of leadership, as well as making sure the nonprofit is prepared for unexpected departures. And it's a key for sustainability. And I know a lot of people don't like to think about the possibility of someone leaving for many different reasons, but it's good to have something like this in place because if something happens, then you know exactly what's going to follow up. So if your board president leaves because he or she they got a better offer somewhere, or they had to move clear around the world, or they're retiring and decided they didn't want to do this anymore, and it's a, all of a sudden thing because they won a lottery and they can finally have the money to do that, then you have a succession in place. You don't necessarily mean have the vice president take their place, but maybe there's a voting or something like that. But that's dependent on what the organization as a whole decides what that succession plan is going to be. And it's not just at the board level, but it's also at the staffing level. You know, your executive directors, your program directors, program managers. You know, what happens if they leave or something happens to them? So you want to make sure you have a succession plan in place at all levels of the organization. Okay. Before we get into the next session, we're going to have a little poll here. Give my voice a little break. Is how many programs do you have in your organization? Do you have 0 to 1, 2 to 5, more than 5? And if you're having problems seeing the poll, it might be somewhere on your screen. Zoom tends to hide things behind stuff if it didn't pop up right in front of your face. So this is kind of interesting trying to pull all this together because earlier, remember I talked about organization budgets and then program budgets and project budgets. Um, this is kind of how that is built in a way. So initiatives promote specific goals of an NPO, and it's a larger goal which needs to be broken down into smaller work items such as programs. And it is the entire scope of what needs to be accomplished by the organization. And then the program underneath it, there can be several programs under initiatives. And those programs promote the initiative goals. And it's managed in a coordinated manner to obtain benefits not attainable from managing them individually. Jeff has a question about, is there a good place to get a good NPO budget template? I believe so. I think I have one around in, Tom and I will keep track of that. And when we get this recording loaded, we'll upload a budget template at that time. Yeah, I'll have got several that I need to look through first. Okay, back to the program thing here. And then projects promote the program goals. Now, projects are specific efforts undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Now, projects are temporary. They have a defined beginning and end date. They have a specific scope, and they dedicated resource to support the effort. And then the task and activity is basically promotes the completion of a project, and they are a single unit of work in a single step in a multi-step project, and it's accomplished by a set deadline and must contribute towards work-related objectives. So that's how all these things are broken down. And I put this in place because as part of the grant readiness checklist, I put in the initiative or programs information and project information. And I did that because for each initiative you should have all these things about it. You should have a detailed description. You should have the year it was established. If it's at a separate location and address, if there's someone who oversees that initiative, what their contact information is, if there's a specific population you serve with that initiative, what that staffing structure looks like, what the staff roles and jobs descriptions are, and the story and history of that initiative. And the initiative is not akin to the mission and vision because what it does is it helps promote the mission will help serves the mission and it promotes the vision is what it does. So for example, I don't know if there's anybody here from the nonprofit that I sit on the board, but Spokane Tribal Network, one of our initiatives is food sovereignty. And under food sovereignty, we have different programs. And one of those programs is restoration of traditional gathering sites. Another one is traditional food gathering and let me think, food gathering and preservation. And then we have another one with the teaching the kids the names of all the different traditional foods and how to gather them and care for them. So we have a lot of different programs underneath our initiative of food sovereignty. So that's an example. And we have detailed description of it, the year we established it, where it's located, and the different populations that are served by that program. So it's really, that's how I came across this idea here. Um, and also we are asked about those initiatives and programs by certain different federal agencies, like the USDA asks certain things about our initiative. Another funder asked us about our programs that we have under this initiative. So it's good to have this on hand so you're not writing up new stuff constantly. If you have it already written ahead of time, all you have to do is copy it, paste it into your application, and it's done. And you don't have to pull your hair out or your hair doesn't turn white. Okay. Also, you need previous year's data if it's applicable, but you should have the number of people you've served, population demographics, the amount of money you've earned and spent. And what I mean by earned is like money that you have grants awarded, or if you have, if you're selling your products that you've put together, like food sovereignty, if we sold our elderberry syrup, how much we sold for it, or if we donated it, how much we donated it, how number of volunteer hours that were documented that goes into that work, um, and the amount documented of in-kind contributions. So if people donated their mason jars so that we can can our elderberry syrup, then we would keep track of how much that would cost. Previous year's outcomes and current outcome measures. So the previous year's outcomes is that we wanted to make sure we planted 10 new huckleberry plants. And we actually, I think we did meet that 10 huckleberry plant thing. And so our current outcome measures, we moved it up to 15. And so we have to make sure we meet that. That's basically showing that we're moving forward with our different programs and what those measures are and what those outcomes are within those programs. And then the initiative itself will have its own outcomes based on what the program has. So you can show how much is being done in the community with actually strong numbers. And when you have data like that, hard data like that, you're more than likely to get the money that you need. Okay. Same thing for the project information. Let me see here. Again, detailed project description, the period of performance, when the start date to end date is, if there's a location address, contact information, population you serve, because it might be separate. It might be a small little segment out of the whole community that you're serving with this project. So you want to make sure you have the right population, the staffing structure, staff roles, descriptions, and story and history of that project. And this is really good to have because you may be asked by the federal government for your past performance. And when they talk about past performance, which I'll get to in a couple more slides, but just to let you know, part of your past performance is what other projects you've worked with and what those performance dates are, and how many who you served and stuff. Because if you can show a history of doing similar work, and you show that you've done it well with the data and stuff that you collected with that project, then more than likely than not that they will reward you money to carry on with that work. So you want to make sure you have that all on hand. Same type of stuff. So I'm not going to go over that again. All right, before we go over other documentations, does anybody have any questions or something? Other documentation. Now, this is something that came to my attention this year from another nonprofit that I work with. And she was talking, her nonprofit is about 2 years old. And she said, I really want to put key performance indicators in more than just metrics because I think it's really important to do that. And I said, well, okay, but why would you say key performance indicators? And she says, because key performance indicators actually measure the health and progress of a company as it reaches its goals. And I said, well, okay, but aren't metrics like that? And she says, no, it's not quite like that. And so when I went around and looked at this, I found this diagram that says, I found actually this word here that all KPIs are metrics, but not all metrics are KPIs. And I thought, okay, I wonder how that's different. And I found this cool little diagram here that KPIs actually reflect businesses' objectives or goals and show how successful it was at achieving it. And that metrics reflect the success of KPI related business activities. And I thought, so what does that mean together? So together, they can be quantified as tactical or strategic activities. So basically, what you're looking at is that you're using KPIs to recognize patterns within your work that you're doing. And when you look at those patterns, you can make strategy adjustments as you work towards your organization's objectives. And that's why KPIs are better. The key performance indicators are better than just metrics. So when you see grantors asking for metrics, think first about key performance indicators. What's going to be the key indicator that you performed well for this particular project or this particular program or this initiative? Think about how it will show the difference that you've moved forward from one place to another, and seeing it will be indicated. And that's one thing that's important I wanted to bring up, because we're talking about metrics and we're talking about data, and a lot of people think that data is a four-letter word, which it is. It's not a bad four-letter word. It's just this one that kind of makes you want to pull your hair out. But it's not bad because it helps you make key informed decisions about your organization and where you need to go. And once you have that data in place and you can see the trends that are going on, then you can also help identify what indicates the best part of those trends. And that's where this comes in. A couple of other documentation pieces. You may hear the word memorandum of agreement, which is basically a legal document that describes a business partnership between two parties that have agreed to cooperate to meet an agreed objective, or basically they work to complete a project together. And an MOA is the agreement part is important because it may include financial transactions based on each party's role and tasks that are clearly identified. So that has to do with a certain amount of money going on. If you have a project and you get an MOA with a partner and you say, for this amount of money, we will give you this amount of money if you will fight us with this. And that would be a memorandum of agreement. A memorandum of understanding, however, is non-binding, whereas the MOA is binding. And the MOU states that you have an intention to act to conduct a business transaction or to form a new partnership with each party's role clearly identified. So an MOU would come under, like, if you have a partner and you're wanting to do something under a federal grant, and please note that federal grant money does not allow you to buy food or use food in any occasion or any event and stuff. So you would have to make a memorandum of understanding with a partner who has food, maybe a food pantry or something, and that if you will allow them to share a certain space that you have available, if they will provide food for events that you provide for your community. So it's a memorandum of understanding. It's not binding, but the memorandum of agreement is binding. Now, the next handout, the reason I'm putting up the value of volunteer time report, this is by the independent sector. And every year since the 1900s, they've been putting out this value of volunteer time. And it's important, which is why I'm asking you guys, do you have volunteers? Yes, no, don't know. And if you take the time to fill this out, you'll find out why this is very important. I found out in some of the work I've been doing the last couple of years is that not a lot of nonprofits know how to count their volunteer time or how to use it to their advantage. That's good that you guys have volunteers. That means you have people in your community who are passionate about the work you do. And here's a blow up of that value volunteer. The tracking volunteer hours and volunteers helps paint a complete picture of your organization. It can help secure grants and recognize the volunteer time is a valuable opportunity for volunteers themselves when they seek a job. And it also identifies potential recruits for your organization. But volunteer hours are valued differently per state according to independent sector. So if you look here, under the United States, the value of volunteer time is $31.80 an hour. For Washington State, that is higher. It is $37.63 an hour. Oregon is $32.37. California is $37.32, and Idaho is $27.79. As you can see, Washington values its volunteers much higher than the other states on the West Coast. And what that means is that for every volunteer hour you have, so if you say you have 100 volunteer hours, you have 3,763 valued dollars of volunteer time, which means when you come to a grant that asks for matching funds and they accept volunteer hours as matching funds, you can use that to match those funds. So if you have 100 volunteer hours, that means you got $3,706 for match. And so if you document those hours, meaning that you have a timesheet or something that you ask your volunteers, okay, could you sign in and let's document your hours of volunteer time. And then you might want to set up some sort of thing for them. I don't know if you give them transportation money or gift cards or gas cards or however you want to give them, but you don't pay them a salary, you don't pay them anything, but you give them stipends or you help them buy books for school or something like that. You can still count that full $37.63 per hour. And not only that, if you have someone who does volunteer work for you at their expertise capacity, like for example, you hire me to write grants for you, but I charge, let's just say I charge $100 an hour, but 50% of that will be volunteer time. So $50 an hour is what you can charge for my volunteer time. And however many hours I give you would be that much more in volunteer hours that's been documented. And you can add that to your in-kind contribution for your match if you need to. Okay, so that's why this is so important that if you start documenting your volunteer hours, you can start building a bank of volunteer hours that you can use for matching dollars with any grantors that require match. Or if they ask you for in-kind contribution, it shows that people in your community care enough to help out your organization. And it might even help you get more money. Okay. Um, we'll be talking about this probably I think in my next one and the third installment of this series. So if you want to ask questions now about this, we can do that because I know we've got some time here going.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
My name is Stephanie. So if someone is donate or like discounting their hours, is there a benefit for them too, like on their side? If we're able to provide like they gave those in-kind donations?
Hmm. Yeah, we can use it as tax write-off. So we can put in our charitable donation pro bono, the $50 an hour that I donated and the amount of hours, I can put that in as a pro bono thing that I provided that for you guys for a nonprofit.
Perfect.
Hmm.
Perfect. And then just one last question.
Hmm.
What's the best way to track your volunteer hours to show like who's doing what and all that stuff?
Okay. If you have a time tracking thing for your regular staff, you can give your volunteers their own numbers, was one way. You can have them write it down on timesheet on hard paper. You know, there's a lot of different things. It just depends on what your nonprofit is already using for your staff or how you're tracking hours altogether. You may want to talk to your accountant on how to do that or talk to a tax expert or somebody that can help you identify that, what would be best for you, because each nonprofit will have a different way of tracking hours. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, um, can you utilize the volunteer hours if an individual is doing community service?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. That's something we'd have to ask a lawyer about, I
Okay.
think. That seems like it's a legal question. So, because they're not there voluntarily, they're directed there. So, it's a little different. But thank you for asking, Tess and Stephanie and Jeff. Anybody else have any questions? See, I really like to talk about this because there's a lot of people who don't understand the importance of documenting volunteer hours. And so I want to make sure that you guys do that and take advantage of that. Okay. Next, collaborating partners and corporate resume past performance. I kind of combine this because um, your collaborating partners are basically organizations that agree to share resources. And that can be space, knowledge, staff, volunteers, supplies, food, finances, workload, etc. And it's to accomplish a mutual goal for the good of the shared community. Because there's probably about 3 or 4 nonprofits who have the same communities that they serve. And you want to make sure that everybody doesn't reinvent the wheel continuously. You want to collaborate with them so you get the most out of allocating your resources and sharing your spaces. And this may include an MOU or a MOA between 2 or more organizations or departments or agencies or whatever. So, and then the corporate resume or the past performance, which I talked about a little bit earlier, is a listing of your work of your organization has completed or is currently working on. And elements of a past performance include purpose, outcomes, accountability, and teamwork. Includes the name and title of the project, the grantor, client, period of performance, the amount of money and description of the project elements. And it's also good to include client contact information for references. So this example here I provided, it also has partners in here. So this is basically what I wrote for my work for Empire Health Foundation is this nonprofit 101 series, and it says Empire Health Foundation from June 1st to the present, and then I didn't put in the dollar amount, but you can see that there's dollars there. And what the areas are, the duties, the contractor role, the beneficiaries, and the partners. And Vexing Media is a partner, which you know Tom is part of. And then a description of what I did. And so you can see this is what a past performance looks like. The one thing that's missing here is the my contact, which would be Jerry Rathman, and I don't have her on here. I basically because I have no room, but you get the idea. If you have something like this in a document, and when you go through and apply for different um, applications or different grants, and they ask you if you will, have you had any experience in this type of work? And then you can pull these things off of a Word document, copy and paste it. Well, yes, we have, and here's our list, and you have it right there, and it's available. It's a good rule of thumb is to keep up with these things. As a business owner, my own, and doing all this work that I do, I have to update this. I try to update it on a monthly basis. Lately, I've been updating it every 2 weeks. And I want to keep on top of it because I hadn't done it for like 3 months up until I think it was June when someone said, "Oh yeah, it was somebody. It was Jeff. He wanted me to help him teach a class, and I had to do my CV, and I hadn't done that CV since 2017, and that took a long time. So I said, okay, no more. I'm gonna keep up with all of this. So it's better if you keep up with all of this as you go along and do the work rather than try to go back, oh, what was I doing 3 years ago? So learn from my mistakes and make sure you keep everything up to date. Okay. And Jeff, sorry I keep picking on you. Sorry about that. Let's see. Okay. He doesn't mind. He's a good guy. All right. So other documentations, lessons learned, best practices, and letters of support and commitment. Lessons learned is more for yourself than it is for the grantor. Sometimes you'll get someone asking you about lessons learned, but more than likely they're going to be asking you about best practices. So basically, they're kind of a mirror of each other. A lesson learned is poor work practice or an experience captured and shared to prevent repetition. And then a best practice is a good work practice or innovation captured and shared to promote repetition or a business model for such a practice or innovation. So they basically mirror one another. But when you combine them, the objective is to improve methods that currently exist for performing work and solving problems. And it's a means to learn from both mistakes and triumphs and building a record of what is learned. And this putting this record into organizational knowledge base in an easy, accessible form and attaining the habit for future reference and use, thereby achieving continuous quality improvement. The reason I bring this up is because I believe that one of the key pieces of sustainability for any organization is continuous quality improvement. You can only stand on your laurels for so long, but you want to keep improving and bringing things to your community to help them improve and to understand, that, which is why you'll see at the end of this, I'll be asking you guys to fill out a survey about how I did on this training piece. And if you had any comments or if you have any suggestions for improvement, it's because I want to know how I can make my trainings better for you and for others who follow to find out information. I'm all about training and giving people the knowledge that they need to move forward. And I want to have my practices be the best that they can be at all times. And so I'm continuously looking at ways to improve my work. And evaluations is one piece of it. And I think that's a good way for sustainability too for organizations because if an organization is continuously looking for ways to improve the work and to provide services to the communities that they serve, they stand a better chance of remaining in that community and serving that community for many, many years than if they didn't listen to what was going on or were open to change. And if they aren't open to change, then I don't think they'd survive very long in today's climate at all. But that's just my opinion. Um, Letters of support or commitment. Basically, it's a support letter. It can be written by a public official, a community group, another nonprofit, any number of entities. And it's basically saying that the organization writing the letter supports the project and would like to see it funded. Excuse me. A commitment letter is written by a project partner or collaborator that is committed to the partnership for project completion, for sharing your resources and stuff, or if you're looking to have someone step into a position of like the project director of that certain project, and that they write a letter say, I'm committed to this project because of these reasons, and hopefully those reasons align with what the project is going to do. Okay, so that ends the grant readiness checklist. Well, then let's move on to the next section then. Let's look at the nonprofit organization holistic model. This is the handout we'll be going over. And I developed something similar to this when I was working at Potlatch Fund, which is a native-led nonprofit that was headquartered in Seattle, had an office here in Spokane at the Philanthropy Center downtown Spokane. And I changed a little bit because I think that the board of directors and all the things that circle this thing here support the constituents and the beneficiaries that they serve, not the other way around. I had the board of directors in the middle, and it just didn't quite feel right. And I think this is a better look at it. We'll talk about each of these areas, and one of the things, each of these shapes have the same level of importance. Nothing is higher than the other. And Each piece of the whole works with another one to perform the activities to help the nonprofit run smoothly through its life cycle. And as it runs smoothly through its life cycle, it supports the constituents and the beneficiaries that they serve. And the double arrows means that everybody um, works back and forth together. If this was a 3D version, you would see arrows going over the top, like revenue also supporting staff and volunteers and administration. So everything should be there, but I'm not that good of a drawer artist. So we'll stick with the flat 2D version here. Okay. So we're going to start with the board of directors. And here we go. I put a table together because, as you see here, the board of directors, they govern and support. So what that means is that the board acts to govern the nonprofit organization and the board acts to support the nonprofit. And the objectives are similar but different. So when you govern, the board represents the community's interests within the nonprofit. So the board governs that way. But when it supports the nonprofit, it represents the nonprofit's interest in the community. So they have two things that they have to do. And the governance support are two different things. The board acts as a body when it governs, but it supports as individuals through their committees. The responsibilities are different also. When they govern, they direct, they provide legal compliance, and they provide financial compliance. But when they support, they help with fundraising. Basically, they contribute to the nonprofit's success as appropriate to individual resources. So they can be financial, they can be event volunteers, business contacts, etc. And they assist staff in raising funds. They also, part of the responsibilities when they govern is that they help plan. So they help determine any strategies and priorities. They help with the programs by determining the priorities. They monitor implementation and they conduct program evaluation to measure impact of those programs in the community itself. And they ensure a realistic budget that maximizes use of all resources, financial and human. So that's important because what that word realistic is important because they know what the money is. And if the staff has this pie in the sky budget, but we only have a hot dog level budget, then they look at the realistic budget. But they help on the support side raise money so they can reach that pie in the sky budget. So it's a balancing act for the board. On the support side, they actually do public relations and community contacts because they're ambassadors to the community on behalf of the nonprofit and its clients as well as the community. They engage in recruiting volunteers and they advise the staff in areas of expertise and they provide a sounding board for the executive director. And then they have a reputation. So they lend their names and personal credibility to the nonprofit for marketing and revenue development. Now, some of the things, this one quotation I found from Jan Masako from Compass Point is that much of the confusion about board responsibilities is confusion between what the board should do as a group and what individual board members should do. And that's what we're talking about here is that as a group, they govern. As an individual, they support. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand when they're board members, what that means and what they should be doing. So that's something that needs to be discussed in great detail and understood by everybody, not just the board, but the staff and the community needs to understand how that works. And we're going to talk a little bit about this in a little bit more detail because it's a very big piece here. So as a group role in governing, a board member has to ask, is this nonprofit using public and private resources to benefit the community and the public? And while they keep that in their head, they're looking at the money that's coming in. They're looking at the donations that is coming in, and those donations can be either money It can be in kind. It can be volunteer time. It can be, space that they're being lent. So is the nonprofit using this resources to benefit the community? They have to keep that in their head at all times. Also, they have to consider the financial responsibility because they have to protect the community's interest by making sure those funds are used appropriately and in support of the organization's mission. And that's really important because that's what the IRS demands is that you have to use your funding to support the organization's mission. So you have to make sure your mission is up to date and that your everything you're doing supports that mission. And you have to take a look at a conflict of interest policy to make sure that there's no conflict of interest going on and the financial statements. That's how they take a look at the financial responsibility as a group. Their financial decisions are to review and approve an annual budget. They set and approve executive director salaries. They select an external auditor. They set investment policies and they establish internal control policies. And those control policies are mostly likely going to be fiscal policies because it's the money trail that people follow. And then they are also liable. The board of directors are liable because they have to govern and they have to make sure that everything gets taken care of. Basically, that the taxes are paid and that the board members and directors are covered by liability insurance because it's their heads if the organization fails and they are responsible to make sure that the organization is moving forward according to their mission. Now, I had to come up with a good poll here, and I wanted to know, are your board of directors cool cats? A, yes, all are. B, most are. C, some are. No, none are. They need sunglasses. I thought it'd be time to put in some levity here at this point. So, in a sense, the board stands in the community and looking into the door of the NPO. They're the ones that are scrutinizing the work and governing the thing. And I found this picture and I just had to use it because I have cats, but I thought it'd be a good thing to put in there. I couldn't find a door of them looking into a door, but I think this will work. So they're representing the community and scrutinizing the work that the organization is doing as a group. That's what the governing part is. Now, the individual role is that they're representing the nonprofit interest of the community. So they're ambassadors, they promote the work in the community, they promote support for our initiatives, and they represent the board at city council meetings. And they make sure that the people know about the nonprofit and what's going on. Also, as individuals, they understand the mission, the vision, and the purpose of the organization. They attend the meetings. They sit in on committees if there are committees. They make contributions, either financial, in kind, or pro bono. So they support the nonprofit in a lot of ways as individuals. So in a sense, the board stands in the nonprofit facing out and speaks to the community in the nonprofit organization's voice. Now, this is interesting because you're looking at me like you don't believe me, but it's true. There is a poll taken, and the majority of cats agree that generic cat food tastes the best. And you can see that that cat does not believe what the board member is saying. So, and again, I brought this up because the data thing that we talked about earlier, if you have the data to show that cats actually like generic cat food, then maybe that cat wouldn't look so skeptical. So, so the next step in this is administration and the organization oversight. So I put a little short org chart here. So the organizational oversight is done with the executive director. And this may differ in your nonprofit. You may have an executive director, you may have a network director, you may have whatever that person that you want to call who heads, who works with the board and moves the organization along its mission. And then to support the executive director, you have all the admin staff, a volunteer manager, office manager, and admin assistant. There's a lot of different names for people at that level, but you get the sense that these are the people who make sure that the office is run. And they oversee the people or help the people who actually run the programs of the nonprofit too. So that's the administration oversight. So next is the staff and volunteers that do the day-to-day operations. So the difference between the staff and the volunteers is that the staff get benefits, the volunteers don't. The hours are full time for staff. They're set. That means they work 8 to 5, 7 to 4, however you get that set up. And volunteers are usually part time, and they don't have set hours. They work according to what they can provide. And the staff um, has certain duties per job descriptions, and the volunteers, their tasks are not listed in staff job descriptions, but I think that's a mistake. I think if you have jobs that are done by volunteers, they should be job descriptions there as to what's expected to perform that job well. Um, and I think I'm going to have to change that because I've learned in my own work that people who volunteer like to know what's going on and know what's expected of them. And if you have it written down that if you're volunteering for the specific task, that you should have the expectations of that task, what level of experience, certain things that need to be done, that should be listed down. So I'm going to have to change this up a little bit. I'll change it in the workbook so it's better than that. I promise. Okay. Yes, Stephanie, question?
I don't know if this can be a possibility, but if you are going to extend anything on this slide or in the future with
Mhm.
volunteers, I really would love to figure out ways to best use my volunteers because
Okay.
sometimes what I find, one, I get nervous or worried that I'm going to give them something too hard or something that's not appropriate or something that I don't know, it's just going to be questionable, and I don't know if that's just like me used to doing everything, so having to delegate and then let some of those guards down I think is really
Mhm.
difficult. And then also, like, what's the best way to ensure that your volunteers feel appreciated and wanted to come back? So I don't know if there's some like list of things, and I mean, I know that sounds like really silly for some people, like this is how you use them, but I tend to not, I feel like I'm not using my volunteers to the best, of their abilities and all of those different things. So, anyways, I really like that you talked about having a job description for a volunteer. I haven't
Mhm.
thought about that. Just, having them come in and telling them what you need done. And then when they finish it, then it's like, okay, but actually creating something that would help them think about doing ongoing work with you. I
Mhm.
really like that.
Yeah, that's a good question because I think a lot of nonprofit organizations, some of them want to use volunteers, but they're not sure how to, or they were nothing but volunteer run and they knew how to. Now they're hiring staff and they don't know how to use them. So it's like the opposite thing. Um, I think I think it's really important because I think a volunteer feels valued when they know where they're needed most. And maybe you have a volunteer job board where you can list the jobs that you need volunteers to do, and you list the requirements. You list what uh, if they have certain expertise and skills like that, and then the volunteers choose what they want to do. That might be one thing. I know some organizations would have volunteer appreciation days, maybe once a week, and not once a week, once a month, where they would give shout outs to the volunteers that did super things that month, and what they did and how it helped. Um, Especially if you have like big events like galas or auctions and stuff like that, and you have a lot of volunteers keeping track of who they are and what they've done, and making sure that they're acknowledged. I kind of mentioned earlier, maybe providing gift cards, gas cards, find out what they need and provide those type of things rather than monetary. Some like stipends or honorariums, or, it just depends. It depends on the community that you serve, and maybe they would like to tell you, well, how do you want to honor our volunteers? Because they work so hard and they're not really getting a lot of appreciation or recognition for the work that they do. So I think I will add something into the workbook about volunteer stuff because I think that's important. And the reason why I put volunteer manager in the organization chart, because I think it's important that you need someone who works directly with the volunteers and finds out a lot about them. Like collecting their resumes, finding out what they like to do. There's an exercise I have some of my grantees called "How many hats do you wear?" where everybody writes down the different hats that they do within their job and stuff, and then each job has a different hat, and they put in there why they like it, why they don't like it, and then they share it. And you might find people who don't like who who that you don't like something, but someone else likes what you don't like, and you can change jobs, and everybody's happier than they were before. So there's some ideas that you can think about. And thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate the question. And I wrote it down so I can add an extra section to the workbook. Okay. The next thing is mission management, otherwise known as programs and services. And basically, it's serving the community through your initiatives, programs, and projects. And these are managed through your program director or directors. And you may have just a single evaluation director or evaluation specialist or somebody who captures all the data from all the programs and the projects. It might be best to have just one person on staff who does it for all your programs and projects and manages the data. They may have people underneath them. Like your program directors will have program managers or program project managers, project coordinators, evaluation directors could have evaluation specialists, evaluation coordinators, that type of thing. And those could be volunteer and people from the community to help with that. Finance management, which is a big piece. It's the primary purpose of finance management is to take care of the monetary and the material resources of the nonprofit organization. And this diagram here basically shows your finance management cycle. You have accounting, reporting, analyzing and planning, that you record, present, interpret, and respond to financial data. It's incorporated in a meaningful way for decision making and planning using these four different things. And so I'm not getting into that because, like I said, finance management is like a whole 3-day seminar thing. Oh, and Tatiana, thank you. April is National Volunteer Month. That's a good time of year to recognize everybody. Good point. Thank you. The next part is revenue management, and it's also known as fundraising. And it's a second business of a nonprofit organization. We're going to talk about the two businesses here in a little bit. But once raised by revenue management, then the finance management oversees the income. So that's why it's a two-pronged thing, is that you're taking a look at the money coming in and then what happens after the money comes in. So now we're to the community constituents and the beneficiaries. So basically, nonprofits are formed to provide a benefit to the public or a designated community. Everybody has a different community that they serve. And you want to involve your community that you're serving because you want to be able to identify and assess the needs of that community and prioritize the community needs to be addressed. And you definitely want to make sure they're involved because nobody wants to be thought of having something put together for them, but they're not involved. They're not being asked what they need. They're just thought, oh, well, here, we know you need this, but it wasn't anything that they needed to begin with because they weren't asked. One thing to think about is that when I was working with the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration as a project manager for the Circles of Care grantees, all the youth were really upset because everybody was saying, well, this is for the youth, it's to help them with their mental health and stuff. But the youth were saying, you're not asking us what we need. You're assuming that you know what we need, but you're not assuming right. So why can't you just, nothing about us without us? Don't make any decisions about us unless you ask us first if you really need it, or else you're just wasting your money. So basically, talk to your community members, get out there, learn who they are, invite them to into your place, and ask them. First of all, to find out if you're assessing the needs of the community, find out what they need. Ask them questions. Well, tell us what you need. Give us a list of 10 things that you think the community needs. And then get together a dinner or something, some kind of community gathering. And as they give you all these things and you guys sort it all out and you find out what the top 5 things are, you get them all together in another gathering and to prioritize what those needs are. And this organization in Ohio, I have cousins who are the executive director and the training technical assistance guy there. They got together and they got together a whole meal with Indian taco meal. People brought stuff. There's like 500 people there. They had already sent out these polls and things earlier, like a couple months earlier. Send us your list of what the top 10 things that you think that we need to do as a nonprofit. Everybody sent in their answers. They invited them in for this big, huge community gathering. And they put up the top 5 on big post-it notes, and they had baskets under each one. And everybody who was there got $100 in Monopoly money, and I think it was either $20 fake bills or $10 fake books, whatever. And they asked them to put their money where they wanted the needs to be met. And so at the end of the day, and everybody left, each of those baskets were full of money. They counted up all the money, and based on where most of the money is, they prioritized the community needs for that year. And I thought, wow, that is ingenious because it got everybody together and it got the community involved. They ate, shared a meal, shared stories, had a great time. Nobody peeked to see who put money where, and they just enjoyed being together. And then from there, they went and used a different kind of assessment tool to really dig in deep, called the community readiness model, to find out exactly what needed to be done in the community. And they were able to strategically plan how to meet those needs. And I thought it was a wonderful thing that they did. And so I share their story every time I have this kind of conversation with people. 2 business models. This is really important because people don't realize that nonprofits have 2 business models. The first one is mission management. And basically, it's the mission, finance, and capacity. And the mission is where the board and staff fulfill community expectations. Capacity is the community expectations, basically quality programs, quality services, and finance management, basically monetary stewardship. How well do you care for the money? How well do you care for the resources that are part of nonprofit organization? And then the model number 2 is the revenue management, which is, you can see, there's a big black line under there between capacity and finance. And revenue management is basically reliable funding to sustain programs and services. Your community hates it when you have a project that's going, and projects are short term, but you don't find any funding to continue that project and make it a program. Because if they love that project so much and you're getting great response, if you can't find funding to sustain that project and make it a program, and you do that often and it goes away, you're going to start losing the relationship you have with your community. You're losing that trust. If you've built something that is so stellar, you should be able to find funding to sustain it. And then the revenue management intertwines with the finance and capacity. Basically, what was said earlier, that capacity is the community's expectations and the money to pay for it. So that's why revenue management is so big underneath those 2 things. And it's important to make sure all of this triangle remains equilateral so nothing gets skewed. I know it looks a little skewed here is because I was playing with it and it didn't stay where I needed it to. So that's it. That ends my discussion. I've got you a list of references here of everything that I referred to. And then here's the questions. If you guys need some answer some questions. If you have questions, I will take them now. If you want to talk about something or share a story, that's good too. But I'm one last laugh. I know people are going to start jumping off here. So here's the last laugh. I told a joke on Zoom at a Zoom meeting and nobody laughed. Turns out I'm not remotely funny. And not really. I did much better when I was in California on a training and people laughed all the time. So thank you. And I think we can go ahead and here's my contact information. And I think we're going to launch the link for the evaluation of this. And we'll also send out a link to in a follow-up email. So if you didn't get it while you're here. And we have recorded this and I'll be posting it. And once we get the closed captioning embedded in it. Any questions? Stories? I mean, you guys are so welcome. I really like doing this stuff. Teaching and giving out information. Okay. Thank you. I was afraid I was getting too pedantic.
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
Do you ever do I've already started my nonprofit and I've got like so much stuff going. Do you do like assessments or like audits almost to like say like this is where you're at and this is where what you're missing?
I could probably do something like that. I haven't actually done it, but I've taught others to do it on their own to just take a
Okay.
look at. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Well, thank you. I definitely would like to learn more if that's something that is available.
Oh
That's
yeah.
like the place I get always stuck is like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
everything seems like it's going good, but I know I'm missing stuff. I just don't know
Yeah, you
what
don't know
I'm
what you don't
missing.
know. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. So yes,
Yeah,
and
I
to
was going to
answer,
echo. I
yeah.
was going to echo that same question because a lot of the things, and then Stephanie and I had these conversations about capacity building and building up the nonprofit, because a lot of the times it's the founder and the executive director doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and it gets overwhelming. So that was a good question. If there are opportunities for some of that, I'm sure a lot of us would be interested in that.
Yeah, there is, and we're talking about continuing these NPO 101 series on different topics and stuff. So if you guys have ideas or something that you want to cover in a 2-hour session, we can easily do something like that. That's no problem. But if you want to do one-on-one stuff, then yes, you can go ahead and you can contact Ash Ryan, who is your technical assistance liaison. Is that right, Ash? You might have to unmute yourself. And she can connect you, if not with me, with others who are nonprofit uh, consultants type thing. And I got into it because I started working at Potlatch Fund and started helping all their grantees and stuff. Jeff was one of my grantees at Potlatch Fund. So that's why I picked on him, because I've known him for 10 years now. So, but yeah, I can help with consultancy or putting more of these together, having topics and stuff. And, I'm thinking about putting together a series under my own company so that people can come in and take a look at these recordings and stuff like that, or contact me directly. So, but thank you for your interest. I really appreciate you guys being here.
Hi y'all. Can I chime in for a second, Maria?
Go ahead, Ash.
Thank you. Y'all, I put my email address in the chat. We do have more funding for additional workshops. And yes, the idea is to do deeper dives and some cohorts. And we'll be working with Better Health Together on that as well to pull resources and offer more for you all. So hit me up with any requests and I'll do my best to make that happen. Also, we do have funds to support one-on-one consultants. So hit me up for that as well. Our budget is pretty slim right now, but we want to support you however we can.
Great. Thank you, Ash. Any other questions? A reflection piece. What do you mean by reflection piece, Stephanie?
So, like at the end of these workshops, or even if there's just like a workshop in general, to have you reflect on the, I don't want to say like the body, but that's the best way to think about it. Like I think about it as a big body of work around nonprofit and asking questions to help you think about what it is that you need to process. I think one of the most challenging things about moving into one of my businesses into a nonprofit is the mindset that I need to overcome. And I think I've been talking to a lot of people that are in Black and brown spaces, and we've talked a lot about just the mindset that you have to like overcome, like things you don't even think that are going to be triggers, or understanding your relationship with money and community, like really being like, for me, nonprofit world really is saying we need you to trust other people to make sure that you're being held accountable to making the right decisions for the community and different things like that. And so I think like at the end of these pieces, like asking those questions of how do you see yourself as a leader now that you have completed this course or completed this workshop? How has this workshop transformed where you're at? Even just like the fact of sometimes these workshops are so good, it almost makes you stuck. Like I'm not going to go and do anything different because I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to go. And so, or you're like, okay, am I going to be doing too much because I'm already going a million miles per hour? So it's just like those little reflection pieces that are challenging executive directors and people within the nonprofit field to build a growing mindset and to address some of the historical and even just present trauma that people may have that you don't know they might not be admitting. And so those are some things that come to mind for me. I know like when I get very overwhelmed, I'll just stop and I won't go forward, and it takes me forever to get to the next step versus like just saying like, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And I have a coach, Ash has worked a lot with me. I really appreciate them. And they had assigned a coach to me, and my coach is really good about knowing when I get stuck and pushing me. And so just having these collective pieces where I can pour into myself and take that learning into with my coach or whoever it may be. So yeah, you just had a lot of good pieces. This was so good. It was so good.
Good. Well, I'm glad it helped. And I think some of the things that we're talking about is like having a peer-to-peer networking session where we can have group discussions like this, or a community of practice where we can come together and, a majority of people have attended these things, and we can ask those questions that you're asking and let everybody talk it out if they want to, and identify some areas and exchange information with one another that they can help one another. I'm really big into relationship building and relationship collaboration. I think everybody has something that they can add to the collective, and it doesn't matter how big or how small. It just that when we add something, it makes things better. And I really believe in that. And I think that I thank you for talking about about going back and talking about what, how this affected you, or what, you need to talk about, or reflecting on things. And that's part of, again, the quality improvement piece too, putting that in place. So thank you very much for bringing that up, Stephanie. And we'll see what we can do about adding maybe after this 3-piece series right now, and then having a discussion about it, spending 2 hours to discuss all these things and providing you guys with questions ahead of time, that might be something to consider. Okay. Anybody else? Quick time check here. It's 7:31. So we got 1 more minute left. If anybody else wants another question or comment.
This is Ginger. I put this in chat, and this is probably too big of a question for 1 minute, but I'm just wondering if you have any alternative leadership models. Like what was presented tonight was kind of traditional hierarchical structure within a nonprofit. And I've spent a lot of time kind of unlearning that that structure, and then interested in finding more resources for alternative structures, just, kind of to fall in line with what Stephanie said. Traditional nonprofit structure is rooted in white corporate America and rooted in white supremacy. And so I'm really interested. I don't know if it's possible to have a truly just an equitable organization that is also a nonprofit, but I'm trying my best to get there.
Yes.
One way of doing that is alternative structures and models. And so I'm just curious if you have, I'm very familiar with like nonprofit AF and nonprofit happy hour and community-centric fundraising and all of that, but just interested if you have any additional resources with regards to that.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
And the reason I presented this as a hierarchical thing, because when the majority of the funders out there are that way, and that's what they expect. And if you give them something that they don't expect, you're not likely to get funded. I'm sorry to say that, but that's true. Even though they may be social justice involved and stuff like that, they're still expecting the top-down hierarchy out there. You can have it 2 ways. You can put one together that's a hierarchical, but you actually rule this way. And like I said, this way that I have up here, there's no hierarchy here. It's all holistic. They all required to work together and stuff. And like I said, if I could draw a 3D thing, you would see a web or like a globe type thing where they're all working together and stuff. It's not hierarchical. Everything depends on everybody else to make sure everything works, and that everybody helps with the community, and the community presents in this too. They're part of it. Even though they're being served, they're part of the organization. They're part of the mission. They're part of the things that you want to get done. I don't know what that's called. I just call it holistic because that's what it was, because it's a part of a whole, and everybody's a piece of that whole. So, and to answer your question, I don't know of any others. So
yeah, we run our nonprofit via flat structure. I know Spectrum does here in town, and I know that there's examples. I'm just curious and always learning more about it.
Well, that's something to consider. So thank you very much. I'll take a look at that. So, anybody else? No? Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. Next week we're going to be running the replay of this. We'll have the whole entire thing run, and then the last question and answers part will be live. So if you know people who didn't make it, or who can't make either one, have anybody who wants to see this, go ahead and register for the next one. And if they don't make it, all the registrants will be sent a link to the YouTube channel where we'll have the workbooks and everything updated. We'll also send you the workbooks when they're completed. I just had some family emergencies that I couldn't get the workbook done, and I'll try to have it done by mid-August for everybody. Okay. A question from Robin asks, how do we manage funder expectations of organizational capacities as a function of our organization's size? I'm not sure I understand that question. Basically, when you get an award from a funder, you need to ask them what expectations they have of your organization and how you're going to serve your population or serve your community. Because as we said earlier, capacity is what your programs and your services is to your community. So depending on your size of your organization, if you just have one person and then you have maybe a couple volunteers, that's what you have to explain to your funders that, we're kind of small, but we try to get out there. You can have group things. You can, sign up more volunteers at these group events type stuff. So there's some ways you can work on that together. Patricia asks, is there additional support for us to have individual help for our organizations? If you are an Empire Health Foundation grantee, you, I believe, contact Ash Ryan, and she's their go-to person for technical assistance, and she can direct you to certain people to help you with what questions you have. And then, did I see or hear there will be a recording on this? Yes, you did. And I'm going to be, once we finally get all the closed captioning and stuff cleaned up, it'll, I'm sorry, I apologize, Ash. I should have said she. They will get a hold of you and let you know who to pass you on to for different kinds of technical assistance levels. But yes, we will have,
Thank you.
you're welcome. We will have this recording up on YouTube. I started a brand new YouTube channel under Spo-ka'nay Enterprises, and we'll be posting that with all the handouts that you got, as well as the one that Jeff Ferguson asked for, a budget template. So I'll probably put a couple of those up there if you'd like to see those too. And then also links probably to the independent sector, which is a great resource for all nonprofits. And because they set out that value of volunteer time report every year, they release it about June of every year for the previous year's numbers. And I think that's about it. And you'll see there's other things that'll pop up there once I come up with some more ideas. Any other questions? Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you on our next one, which will be in September. Let me get you a date really quick on that. I believe we scheduled it for September 14th, and that will be about fundraising. So we'll talk a little bit about fundraising on that. All right, everybody have a good afternoon, and I hope I didn't take too much out of your lunchtime today. Take care, and thanks again for joining us.